Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're going to be covering the topic of customer retention and net dollar retention for SaaS businesses. Understanding these metrics and knowing how to accurately calculate them as a SaaS business owner is going to be valuable to you because of the operational insights that can be drawn from them and because they will inevitably come up in conversations with investors. I will be running through an entire cohort analysis using hypothetical data in order to show you how to accurately calculate these metrics for yourself, and it will also provide some examples of the operational insights that can be drawn from them. As a result of this exercise, we will also be touching on how to calculate customer lifetime value, CAC payback, and the customer lifetime value to CAC ratio. The cohort analysis model that I'll be using for this video was initially inspired by a different content creator named Eric Andrews. I have modified this model for the sake of this video and some other purposes, but I do want to give credit to Eric for his fantastic modeling and great content creation. I want to start this cohort analysis by going through a couple of important definitions. Starting with net dollar retention. Net dollar retention measures the percent change in monthly revenue for a group of customers over a specific period of time. This metric accounts for upsells, downgrades, cross-sells, and churn, and is generally measured over a 12-month period. It's a very commonly used metric within the SaaS industry. A cohort is a group of customers who you track based on an initial purchase month, and then you track their streams of revenue in the subsequent months throughout their lifetime with the business. CAC payback is the period of time that it takes for a business to recover the cost of acquiring a particular customer. And customer lifetime value is the total gross profit a business expects to earn from a customer throughout its entire relationship with the company. The 3 points of data that you'll need to successfully execute cohort analysis is going to be linking customers to an initial cohort month, tracking customer spend through the lifetime, including upsells and downgrades, and ultimately tracking when a customer eventually churns out of its cohort. Okay? So with those 3 pieces of information, filling out this kind of cohort analysis that might be a little bit intimidating at first really is not that difficult, assuming that the data you have to use is reliable and clean and easy to access. The way that you would read this table is that in January, we had a cohort of 65 customers, and these subsequent amounts here are the number of customers that have not churned over, so that remain within the cohort over whatever period of time your table is looking at. In this particular case, we have 12 months here, okay? Similarly, the row here that says February is indicating that February also had 65 customers in its cohort, and that each of these subsequent numbers represents the remaining customers over time. So in this particular case, you would read this as that after 11 months, the January cohort, which started with 65, is now at 57. And then the same thing here is that February's cohort of 65, a different 65 who were acquired in February, 47 of them remain. And then to kind of help conceptualize this for everybody, I've got a table here that shows you basically the number of customers that the business has over time. So originally, at the beginning of this period, let's assume 0 customers at the beginning, you would have 65 at the end of January. Those were the 65 in the January cohort that were obtained in that month. Then in February, you'd have 65 new customers, which would represent February's cohort plus January's remaining 64, so we lost 1. But ultimately, the number of customers you'd have at that point is 129. Same thing for March, it's those 3 added together. Then April would have those 4 months added together, and so on, all the way down this table. And at the end of December, you have 700 customers, which represents all of the remaining cohort customers plus the original 65 that December has right here. Now, obviously, the chances that your cohorts are all going to be the same size in a particular month is not realistic. I've set this up this way though, because it's a little bit easier to understand, in my opinion, if you have the original cohort number the same throughout all the months, because the math is going to be a a little bit easier to understand in that sense. So that's why this is set up this way. And then this business sells a very simple product at $15 a month and has a 35% gross margin percentage. Okay, I've just used, and the only wrinkle I've kind of put in here is that their subscription fee went up to $20 for cohorts subsequent to June. So if you were a customer in June, yours is still going to be 15, but anybody after that's going to be 20. Okay, and you'll see that in the numbers when we run through those in a minute. But ultimately, there's something confusing here. The initial revenue, which is calculated down here, is really going to be 65 times 1 times 15. That's how much revenue that cohort's generating in that month. Okay. Now, first metric that we want to calculate is our customer retention percentage by cohort. That's what this table represents. So like we said before, this row here represents the customer retention percentage of the cohort by month. So here you can see, like we said before, we're going to take 56 and divide by the original 65, and this effectively means that over 1 year, 86% of your customers in this cohort have retained. Okay. Same thing for February, so 47 out of 65, March, 56 out of 65, and ultimately what you want to look for in this table are going to be patterns, okay? So we can see here, February and January is a great pattern being recognized right off the bat here. Something about February's cohort, or the fact that it's 72 after 11 months and that January's is 88, might indicate that for some reason the customers acquired in February, something about that customer base is less sticky or not retaining nearly as well as January's, okay? So what's important here is you can ask yourself a bunch of different questions. Were we targeting the same demographic, the same customer base, and have we changed any of our targeting based on demographics? Have we been doing any promotions that maybe have been helping with retention that might possibly explain some of the variation between the cohorts? And maybe even what is the timing of new features and how does that relate to what's happening within our retention numbers? Are they going up? Are they going down? Are they staying the same? Right? And so you can really start to see into your retention numbers and how those might relate to different strategy implementations or operational changes that you've made over time. So that's your customer retention, which was one of the first primary metrics we wanted to cover here. Now, in order to calculate net dollar retention, we're going to have to get our net revenue by cohort. We kind of talked about this before. Very simple math here though. So this 975 and all the numbers in this table simply represent the number of customers in this month in this cohort times one subscription per customer times $15. And so you can see here that at the end of 12 months, $840 of the original 965 when the cohort started remain. Same thing February, 705 out of the 975, 840 for March out of the 975. Okay. What I like about this table, or this table here, is that you can calculate some rough monthly recurring revenue and annualized recurring revenue metrics from this. So the same exact way that we calculated the number of customers up above, this is going to have that same kind of diagonal addition that we saw before, because the base of customers is growing over time, which means our MRR should be going up as well. And the calculation for that would really just be adding all these diagonal months up. And then these metrics are simply the MRR times 12 to give a rough estimate of what the ARR should be. So this is something you might find useful as a SaaS owner as well in terms of just doing this cohort analysis. It's some supplemental metrics that are important that you can calculate. And then to get to your net dollar retention, all we're doing is the same exact division that we were doing up when we did customer retention, except now we're going to use the gross dollar amount value of the cohorts instead of the number of customers, okay? And so you'll notice that all the percentages are actually the same And that's just because of because we're modeling this out, that's going to be true. But I want to show you where this is going to change and why this is significant. So let's say, for example, I already have some math in here to kind of show you guys this. Let's say, for example, this is where the upsells and the downgrades come in. So when you do this analysis, you're going to want to go to your CRM, get the data from there to see, because things will have changed, right? People maybe have bought additional features, higher grade subscriptions, or they might have downgraded from them, and that's what will impact these numbers. Okay, so as an example, I've added $100 into this particular month, assuming maybe a couple people bought some new features, and you'll notice that is producing so two things to observe here is, one, this number is over 100%. So this $1,000 is actually over the original cohort's net revenue. Even though you might have actually lost customers, this means that the existing base is actually, on a cumulative basis, spending more than the original base, even though there might be fewer customers after 3 months. See if that's true up here. Yeah, there's 3 less customers, but we're earning more. That's why it's over 100%, okay? And again, this table will generally show different percentages because it's not going to be a one-for-one that everybody's just getting $15. You're going to have differential between in the upsells and downgrades that happen over time, and that will mean that these percentages here will not be the same as the ones that are produced in the customer retention. And you're going to be looking for the same exact kinds of patterns that we talked about before. In this particular case, I think you're getting a little bit closer to the features you have, especially because upgrades and downgrades get so important in the net dollar retention. And also you should be looking at different patterns that might explain increases and decreases in customer lifetime value in these percentages as well. But ultimately, point here is that this is how you would calculate your net dollar retention. And here are a handful of different conclusions that you might come to in terms of benchmarks once you get your number. So if it's less than 100%, it means that your net dollar retention is not keeping up, right? It is dropping, and you want to keep it in a 100 to 120% range, which would mean that as you lose customers, people are upgrading, right? And obviously the best would be somewhere over 120%. Oops. Okay, if you just came here for net dollar retention and customer retention, you can click off, but I want to cover a couple more data points. Like, in my opinion, if you're going to do this cohort analysis and you can calculate customer lifetime value and a few other metrics using CAC and the relationship there, you might as well. So that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to button that up. I'm going to button this up as well. Okay. So the next metric we want to calculate here is going to be customer lifetime value. Okay. So the first thing you want to do when you're calculating customer lifetime value is you're going to take this net revenue table, and I've made the math really easy on this one. You're just going to convert the net revenue to a gross margin by cohort by taking the net revenue, and multiplying it by the gross margin percentage here. So very simple math. This entire table here is simply the revenue times the gross margin number. I'm going to button that up. Then the next thing you want to do is calculate the accumulation of these dollars over the lifetime of this cohort. So for example, this is our original gross margin by cohort, and this is the accumulation table. So this is the first month is 341. Next month is going to be 341 plus the 336 to get to the 677, so forth and so forth all the way down. So you can see basically this number here, this $3,900 number, represents that of the 65 original members of this cohort, after 11 months, this company has accumulated gross margin of roughly $3,900 over the course of 12 months. Okay. Same thing for this cohort. You can see it's dropping because they haven't existed as long, right? That might be one reason. Another reason could be the changes, like in pricing, for example, here, which I didn't cover before. You can see it in the net revenue here, where these are like, $800, $900, and then these move up to $1,200, $1,300. But ultimately what's good is that because you're comparing the cohort to itself, the math doesn't necessarily really change in terms of understanding your retention numbers, okay? Button that back up. So once you calculate the accumulated value of all these, now it's pretty simple. All you have to do now is, let's use the January cohort as our example. So I'm gonna take this $3,900 and divide it by the original 65 to get my customer lifetime value. It's effectively gonna be the gross margin value over a 12-month period divided by the original number in the cohort to get you, is basically saying for every customer we acquired in January, 12 months ago, they on average gave us $65 of gross margin. And the reason this is important is because then we can compare it to what it cost us to actually acquire this customer. So for example, this is the original example I wanted to show. Let's say that to acquire this customer, it cost us $20. That means that our ratio between customer lifetime value and CAC is 3, which is actually a very healthy ratio. Here you can see that an ideal ratio would be between 1 and 3, which effectively means that for every dollar spent acquiring a customer, the business is generating $3 of lifetime value. And this is a good industry benchmark to apply yourself against. If you're less than 1, then that could indicate some inefficiencies in the cost of acquiring your customers, or that you might not have the best retention at this point and you need to work on one of those two things. And if it's higher than 3, it signals that you should probably invest in growth, because it means that you're highly efficient and effective in turning those dollars into customer lifetime value. And then just as an example, actually we'll cover that in 1 second. I want to cover the payback period. So in this particular case, if it costs us $20 to acquire this customer, you can see here that it took 4 months for us to effectively broken even on that customer from a CAC perspective. And I think that the CAC payback is something you should be checking on pretty regularly. You'll see here that you want to track CAC payback either monthly or quarterly at minimum. If you're an early stage or high growth SaaS business, you want the payback to really be under 12 months. And the only time that you should have a payback more than a year, let's say, is if you have extremely good and reliably measured retention metrics that would indicate that your customers are going to actually stick around long enough to earn back the cost of acquiring them. A good example would be to change our CAC to $100. If we do this, it shows that on a per customer basis, after the first 12 months with us, we would have only recovered 60 of those dollars. You can also see that our relationship of customer lifetime value and CAC is now less than 1. But for the sake of this example, let's say that our true CAC is $20. These would be our officially measured metrics for the month, which we should incorporate into our profit and loss statement visually so that we can examine the changes in these metrics over time within the greater context of our operations financial performance. Thank you for joining me today, everyone. I hope this video showed how cohort analysis can help you calculate some very valuable metrics for your SaaS business, most notably customer retention and net dollar retention. I also hope that this video showed that cohort analysis doesn't have to necessarily be intimidating. In my opinion, the hardest part is the data collection and tracking up front. If you liked the video, please be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. If you would like any of the work products that were showcased in this video today, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My name is Kyle, this is D3, and I'll see you on the next one.